Hi and welcome back. Did you do the last assignment? Did you crop a square social media profile picture for yourself? I did. It looks pretty awesome, right? I wanted to show my smart side. But seriously, if you haven't done it already, please go do that. Just practice. Even if you want to do something silly or goofy or interesting, whatever. Do something unique. That's great. And share it in the Q&A for the course, because this practice is what's going to really solidify Photoshop for you and get you rocking and rolling at it. And speaking of practice, let's do some keyboard practice. And if you're going to do anything in Photoshop, you have to have an image open. So let's go to Control O or Command O on the Mac. Gotta love those Commandos on the Mac. And we're into our opening dialog box, and let's just grab a picture. Let's just do this rose. And let's practice some of the tools that we've learned. The first one we learned was the crop tool, which is C. And that brings up the crop. And did you notice that this brought up a square crop? Because that was the last shape that we used. And you'll notice up in our option menu, it's defaulting to the square. And this is something that you'll see in Photoshop a lot. If you set a brush size to a certain size, or you set the dimensions of a crop, Photoshop will remember that, and it will generally continue to do that. And sometimes that's really nice. Other times it'll catch you by surprise. So just keep an eye out for that when you're doing different tasks. But we're going to go and get rid of that and just go back to the regular ratio. And then next time it will default to just the full shape. Then we can go do some resizing. Oh, I forgot. It's still set on a ratio of 1:1, which is a square. So if you want to just be able to freely move this shape, then you have to go hit clear. Okay, now I'll pop these down like this, move these down like that, and we can just get whatever shape we want. That looks pretty good. When you're done, you can hit enter. Now we've cropped it. Let's do a little brush tool practice. Hit the B for the brush tool. Make sure your little color palette over here has the black on top and the white on the bottom. And if it's not, you can hit the D key to reset the defaults, or you can click on this little guy here. Then you should have a brush. And then remember to resize the brush, the little square bracket keys next to your P key on the keyboard. You can push the left keys to make it smaller. And sometimes my computer is kind of slow and it doesn't show up on the video right away, but hit the right bracket to make it bigger. Let's make a pretty big brush. And then let's also go up and take a look at our options menu. I briefly mentioned that you also can adjust the opacity, which is basically how transparent your brush is going to be, like how heavy it goes on. So if you have an opacity of 10%, you'll barely see the brush strokes, and if you have an opacity of 100%, then it will completely cover over anything underneath it. And to adjust your opacity, you can just hit the numbers on your keyboard. So if you want 10%, you hit 1. If you want 20%, you hit 2. If you want 90%, you hit 9. And if you want 100%, you hit 0. So practice those keyboard shortcuts. And then we're going to set it at 30%, so we'll hit a 3. And then we can go over here and make sure that the hardness is all the way down, so we have a nice soft brush stroke. And we're just going to create a little vignette around the outside of this. So I'm going to left click and just go gently brushing, not on the red, but around the edges without letting go of the mouse. And then if I want to do it some more, I'll do one more pass, staying right toward the corners. And then maybe even one more all the way on the outside, just to create a little vignette like that. Okay, so that's the B key and the bracket keys to make it bigger and smaller. We looked at the crop, which is the C. The move tool is a little less intuitive. It's a V, so hit V on your keyboard. And now we're in the move tool, so we could grab this and move it around. If you move it, and say you move it over here and you don't like what you just did, or you did it on accident, remember you've got Control Z to undo, or Command Z on a Mac. And If you need a reminder, you can go to the Edit tab and you can look right here. You've got Control Z to undo or redo your move. I just undid it, so now it's going to say redo to basically move it back to where I didn't want it. And then you have these options too, and this is probably the most important one, stepping backwards. It's the same as undo, but now you have to use the step backwards if you want to go back multiple steps. So for step backward, Alt Control Z, or on a Mac, Option Command Z. And again, your version might be different. You just have to play with it to get used to it, because some versions will just use Control Z and you hit Control Z multiple times and it'll keep going backward. But on most versions you'll have to hit Control Alt Z, and I can go back several steps. See, I'm going to undo all of the vignetting that I did and the crop. And if I wanted to go forward, I could hit Shift Control Z. So Control Alt Z to go backwards, Control Shift Z to go forward, and on a Mac that would be Command Shift Z. So you hit Control Shift Z, and that's going to bring back the things I just undid. And you can go until it doesn't do anything anymore, and now I'm back to my vignetted rows. And then real quick, we'll do a little zoom practice. So you hit the Z key to get the zoom, and you can click with your left mouse or hit Alt to put the minus sign in there and click to zoom out. If we want to go to 100%, we can go Control 1. That gets you all the way in there. If you want to move around in your image, you press the space bar to create the hand key, and then you can click and drag to wherever you want. You can also click, while still holding the space bar, you can click and drag and kind of throw it. And it'll slide. So if you want to slide all the way across, it's kind of weird actually, but it's okay, it works. So we got that. And then if you want to go to full screen, you go Control 0, fills your screen. And the final one, if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, you can hit Alt and you can scroll up or scroll down to zoom like that. If you don't, no big deal. You can just use the regular zoom key. And that's it. That's our keyboard shortcut practice for the day. If you weren't following along, I recommend that you just rewind the video and go into Photoshop now that you've kind of watched what I did, and just listen to my voice as we go through the different keyboard shortcuts and practice on your own. I can't emphasize how much difference this will make for you. And if at any point it feels overwhelming or frustrating, or even if it doesn't, I recommend standing up, going and looking out the window, getting a drink. Maybe by this point you need a stiff drink, but get some different perspective, go pet the cat, whatever you have to do to kind of refocus your energies, and then come back and practice these things. You're doing great so far. You've learned a ton already, and we still have a ton more to learn, and it's going to start getting more and more interesting, more and more challenging, but we're going to be able to accomplish more and more with Photoshop as we go. The next lecture is really exciting. I can't wait to see you in there. See you there.